Welcome to the Justice Journal podcast. I'm Sacramento County District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert. I hope you enjoy this podcast series where we discuss important public safety issues and provide insight into who we are as an office and what we do both in the courtroom and in the community to provide the highest level of public safety through prosecution, prevention, and innovation.
Thank you for joining us for this podcast episode. I'm Shelley Oreo. Today we're going to continue a two-part series on the topic of animal abuse. We have several guests joining us today. Can I ask each of you to introduce yourselves, including your background and history with animal abuse cases and your current roles within your organizations? Hilary, we'll start with you.
My name is Hilary Bagley Franzoia, and I am the supervisor of the Animal Cruelty Prosecution Unit in the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office. I also chair the Sacramento County Animal Cruelty Task Force, and those were things that were in the works, or at least at my request, for many years, and it finally came to fruition in about January 2018. So we have worked animal cruelty cases as a vertical team, which means one DA, one prosecutor, has each case from start to finish. Those are vertical teams, and we don't see that with all cases. So since we started, we have also attempted to train not only law enforcement officers on the importance of bringing in these cases, but we've also tried to train animal control officers and agencies on the investigatory tools that they can use to be successful in the prosecution of the cases. Thank you.
Dr. Scott?
Yes, my name is Dr. Cheryl Scott. I graduated from UC Davis Vet School, 25 years ago this year. Before that, I was a nurse and a nurse practitioner, got a master's degree in nursing, but I decided that without saying anything about humans, that I'd prefer to be in animal medicine, so I went to vet school. So I've had some human experience and now 25 years in vet medicine. And what I've done during that time is kind of a little bit of everything. I've worked in private practice, emergency rooms, wildlife medicine, small animal, worked at Channel 13 investigating animal crimes over there or animal issues over there. And so I've kind of done a little bit of everything. I recently worked as a professor at UC Davis Vet School and taught vet students. I've just retired from there, and I'm now spending all my free time at Front Street Animal Shelter. I'm the official foster kitten vet, and I keep coming home every day, from there thinking, what better job is there as a kitten vet? I get to kiss my patients all day long legally. And, it's been tremendous. So that's my background.
Okay. Mr. Altine?
I'm Kenn Altine. I'm the CEO of the Sacramento SPCA, which is the nonprofit of the three shelters. Two of them are municipal, city and county, and then we are an independent, privately funded organization that basically assists people who need to surrender an animal. We know our public shelters are overcrowded with strays, with custody cases, with all the things that we deal with on the Animal Cruelty Task Force. So we remain the place where people can still surrender an animal because they can't keep it any longer.
Last episode, we introduced the Animal Cruelty Unit and Task Force. Hilary sort of recapped a little bit about what those were. Do you want to expand, Hilary, on the work that you're doing in the Vertical Animal Abuse Unit?
Well, I'm very busy. It never ends. It's an assembly line of cases. They're either being triaged for filing or they are in the midst of the beginning stage in the criminal justice system. And even after disposition, the case is still alive in with many defendants because of various progress reports and things of that nature. I can tell you that it's been very challenging. Anytime you have a victim that cannot speak, and you have horrendous injuries, you have to build a case around that. And so that is what we endeavor to do. We've been pretty darn successful. So we're successful, but I'm not going to say it is not challenging, and it does not involve a great deal of work on everyone's part. And we have been very lucky in the formation of the task force to be able to recruit very interested and very energetic detectives from both the sheriff's department as well as the police department to help us do the follow-up the basic detective work that is needed on these bigger cases. And so that's kind of where we're at, and it's always continuing. There's so much more I could be doing as far as going over to the Capitol and speaking to people, but there's just a limited amount of time when you carry 25 cases, and it is not just factually challenging, but legally it's very challenging. The law has been neglected in this regard, as has the cases historically. And so we're talking about a 1905 law, and you're pulling decisions to try to interpret some of those terms, and the legislature has not really deemed it worthy enough to revamp or to add on to. So that's where we're at.
In terms of the task force, Kenn, I'm going to bring you in. How does the SPCA and how do you work with the task force?
Well, I joined the task force. I was so happy that it got formed, and that we have Hilary at the forefront of this effort, where you're going out on a call and you may be taking that animal, but then there's hearings and dispositions and depositions and progress reports and investigations. The entire time that animal is considered evidence, and it's sitting in a kennel, and a kennel environment is not great for any animal. I love my organization. We do a phenomenal job of handling these animals, but that is not a natural environment for an animal. And quite frankly, we immediately start addressing the issues that the animal has, whether it's been neglected and it's starving, we start feeding it. We don't maintain that animal in the shape it came in, right? You know, it's not sealed in a bag and put in the evidence locker. This is a live being. So one of my challenges was, who's paying attention to these dogs? Who's helping get them out of, not just out of the shelter, but quite frankly, out of the custody of the person who did this? Whether they've been convicted or not, something happened to this animal while in their care. I want to separate that person from this animal. And I am looking for every tool I can use to make that happen, so this animal can no longer be the property of this person, that I can get all the treatment it needs that I will pay for. You know, this is why I'm here. I'm here to help these animals. But more importantly, get it into a home where it's not facing this issue anymore.
So is that determined in terms of who owns a dog? Is determined after the case is settled? When is that determined?
It's post-conviction, generally. If you look at it from a legal standpoint, there's a code section in the Penal Code, 597.9. It's a wonderful code section in that it says, after a felony conviction, the person who is convicted cannot own, possess, reside with, care for, or maintain any animal. A misdemeanor is 5 years. So that helps tremendously. But up until the time of conviction, we work hard to get a relinquishment in one form or another.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if we can put dogs in foster, that's great. However, many fosters are hesitant if they feel there is a chance that that dog is going to go back to that person who abused them originally. And
imagine nursing this animal back to health, forming this emotional attachment, and then we come back and say, guess what? It's going back to the person who did this because we didn't have the evidence, this, that, or the other. And I think you do that one time as a foster and you run from that program as fast as you can. Or quite frankly, you take the dog into hiding, and we've seen that happen. It's just like, that dog ain't going back because I don't have it anymore. In fact, I haven't had it for months. You know, I've seen this across the country where there's just, we're going to advocate for this animal because we're just not going to let this happen. If I have to pay the loss of this animal, the $200 or whatever it's deemed to be the cost of that property, people are going to say to do that. I would rather that we get these people advocating for finding the ways, of saying that, okay, at the 10-day mark, let's send a person that bill for all the care that this animal has received. He's received vet care, sometimes surgery, certainly x-rays, housing, food, everything that, let's give them an accurate bill of what it's costing for us to care of the animal. And if they don't pay that bill, they forfeit the animal.
That actually is in the Penal Code.
Yeah.
They have, they're given a summary of assessment of costs, and at 14 days.
Yeah.
And if they do not respond and do not pay that bill, then the animal is deemed abandoned after seizure or impoundment. And then the question is, do I need it for any evidentiary purpose? I generally do not, assuming the agency has done an incredible amount of documentation with their medical staff, their vet staff. Generally at that point, I'm hoping it can be fostered and ultimately adopted. And I also am, pretty frank about any proof problems that occur in the case and whether I believe that this case is going to be fruitful in the end, that conviction is going to come through, so the prohibition will stand as well.
So what's the range of time that you've had animals, abused animals?
Well, I jumped at the chance to join the task force because of a dog named Precious Love, who was seized from people who were not good people. That case went longer than a year, and both Precious Year and her puppy, who came in just months old, did not have the benefit of someone advocating for the forfeiture, ended up in that kennels for that long of a year, not being able, they came in as aggressive dogs because of the way they were treated. They're like, I'm done with humans. Mm-hmm. They only got worse. We ended up having to euthanize those animals, literally breaking the hearts of my staff who cared for these animals every day. They were at the end, there were 3 staff members who could actually get inside the kennel. These dogs had deteriorated so much. And it was my personal vow that this not happen again. We've got to make sure we're using every tool possible to get these animals out of the hands of these people. They eventually lost the case. We all knew they were going to lose the case. It took more than a year to get there.
See, and that's what happens if in a specialized area like this, if you have 30 different people that are, normal felony or misdemeanor prosecutors, not all of them are going to be up on the different nuances in the law for relinquishment and for forfeiture and the ins and outs of it. And I'm not saying it's difficult to learn. I'm saying it's just a specialized area. So Kenn immediately, as soon as we formed task force, was very adamant that was a tremendous issue for him. And it's one that's it's completely doable. We can make this happen if we emphasize to a defendant how much it's going to cost and how much they're being charged on a daily basis just for being difficult, and that they're not going to see this animal after conviction. There's absolutely no reason that they would not agree to relinquishment, and quite honestly, the attorneys in the courts understand it as well. Regardless of whether a person wants to fight a case or the defense believes in, the rights of the defendant and the accused, and we all understand those. If the animal is ultimately not in a good place to be going back, it shouldn't, and they should relinquish it. So we try to, as soon as I go into court and we start the proceedings, even at arraignment, I'm pushing almost immediately, if in fact we have the animal and we're in that situation, we have a relinquishment form, and even if I don't have the form in the file, I can get that relinquishment right on the record. I don't want to get into the weeds of relinquishment, but like we have, but it's just one thing that's doable, and we do normally since we've started the task force and the unit.
So is that something that has changed and is happening more often
yes,
now?
Absolutely. Because it's if your car gets impounded and you don't pay your fees, you forfeit your car.
That's right.
That happens every day. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. It just happens to be a live being. Mm-hmm. And yes, this task force, of all the many things it's done, that has been an immediate change that I am so thankful for.
And remember, these are people who didn't care too much about them anyway.
Correct.
So the only thing standing in the way is if they have a sense of control or ego, where I'm not going to do it. And
it's not a matter of principle because they don't got any.
No, well, many don't, and that is right, and they didn't care enough. So
it's an interesting aspect, though, that think about that. It is evidence. It
is evidence at the moment.
Yeah.
But remember, if everyone does the right job, if it's emaciated, photograph it, weigh it, get it on the index scale that says this is a 2 on the scale, which is bad, or this is a 1 on the scale, which we have seen, which means it is bones with skin stretched across it.
And also, all it takes is for a prosecutor to say to the defense, look, this is the situation with the dog. If you want to see this, you want to have your own independent veterinarian look at this animal and examine this animal, tell me.
Right
now. And chances are, I mean, they know these vets are reputable. You know, they don't have, I don't want to say a dog in the fight, but the bottom line is they are reputable people and they're not going to put their professional career on the line to say something that's not true about the condition of that animal. And so that's how it goes.
There's not a lot of nuance in the condition of these animals.
No,
right?
no.
Dr. Scott, there's just not a lot of nuance with what we're seeing.
Yeah, what you're talking about, like the body condition score, it's very clear.
Yeah.
A 1 is right underneath death. So,
Yes.
I mean, a 1 is a 1. A 2 is a 2. You know, and
So in this case, 1 is really on the worst.
Completely amazing.
Yes.
yeah,
yes.
1 out of 9 is going to be
Yeah.
the absolute
worst.
right before death.
Oh.
And we go to
Yeah.
trial on those.
Yes. But 3 months later, that dog should be right where it's supposed to be, like a 5
Yes.
on
It's
that
phenomenal.
scale. It should be where it is. But so to consider it evidence 3 months later, when it's healthy, its skin has healed,
Right.
you know,
Like you said, it's a live living being.
yeah,
So
it's not evidence in a
I
bag in a
can-
locker.
right.
I kind of feel like at this point I should just say one thing in case people find animals like that are that emaciated, because they are about 2 weeks from death, as
Oh.
I have heard in testimony.
Yeah.
Basically, the organs shut down and they can't absorb food and they go into heart failure, and that's been explained in testimony on the stand. But the public should know that if you find an animal like that and you choose to keep it, you cannot simply just feed that animal the way you feed your own animals, because it has to be put on very, very small amounts, refeeding schedules so the metabolism and the minerals in the body don't go into shock, and there's all kinds of complications. So it has to be little handfuls of food several times a day, refeeding schedules so you avoid refeeding syndrome, which is a very bad thing.
So who do they contact if they find a dog who's in that, or an animal that's in that condition? Who do they call?
Well, they'd call it, that's abuse just like anything else, even if they don't know who did it.
Uh-huh.
They should be calling animal control if they feel that it's worthy of a 911 call. See if, I mean, it depends on how comfortable they feel. I would urge them, if it's, what's going to happen if something is not an affirmative abuse that's taking place at the moment and they just come across an animal that's emaciated in such a fashion, if they call 911, it's going to be sent over to 311. 311 is going to take the information there and they're going to tell them it's going to be several days before we can get animal control out, because animal control has so many calls and they're usually, I don't know how many calls behind.
So then what do they do if it's going to take 2 days and the dog is on death's door? I mean,
So
could they take it to a veterinarian?
you can take it to a vet. They're going to want to put it on your bill. And there are many good Samaritans who will be fine with that. Because remember, this is not a natural state for a stray dog.
No.
We live in an urban area where even the most saddest of stray animals will find enough food to maintain a body score well above 1. This is an intentional act of an animal being denied
Usually they're
food.
They're in
Yeah.
a backyard and it's fenced, and somehow
Yeah.
they managed to get out and they haven't eaten in a very long
Right.
time.
Okay.
That's
Right.
what it is.
Right.
Well, so talking about veterinarians and kind of talking about the topic on a broader level, Dr. Scott, can you tell us some of the things that you see come in through the veterinarian emergency rooms in your experience?
Sure. Let me start with saying the reason for my interest in the task force is Hilary. I watched her on a news clip. I saw her in the newspaper, and her passion sparked me, because I have the same passion. But, you know, as a veterinarian, I obviously consider myself an advocate for those who can't speak up for themselves. And I want to do everything in my power. I'll state it right now and 100 times so she can prosecute with all the perfect evidence. I mean, I want to hand her evidence that's pristine that she can take to court, because my passion is stopping animal cruelty and putting those responsible for it out of commission. So I'm here to help her. So back to your question, as a vet, let me start by saying veterinarians have a challenging position. We're down here at the clinic having a relationship with clients and their pets. We bond to them. That's how we do it. We, have to bond to the human because we love that animal, but the human has to pay the bill. And by and large, we love that they're taking care of their animals so well. So we have a bond. It's very challenging for a vet, first of all, to know the laws. Here in California, it's mandatory reporting, but in other states, there's no mandatory reporting. I think Kentucky doesn't let vets report anything. So, there's a wide array of things that vets may not understand clearly. We often don't understand the grit of the law because, we're not lawyers and we're not district attorneys. So we kind of want to have this bond with our clients and not suspect that they're being mean to their animals, but at the same time, we have to advocate for animals. And that's where my position always is. So in a vet clinic or even an emergency clinic, you may not have a prior relationship, but you also have to consider who and where do I call? Do I have suspicions or do I have evidence? Do I just have a gut feeling or do I really have something to say? What if I'm wrong? What if that's going to affect my boss, my clinic, my practice, my relationship with this patient? We have to ask ourselves these questions all the time. Like, are we really sure? What can we do about this? What is the law going to do to protect me? What is the law going to do to put this guy in jail? And sadly, we get out of school thinking the laws aren't that great. And, what kind of evidence do I need to have? And do I even want to upset the cart here and bring this forward? Like, there's so many things that are challenging for vets. That said, there's no excuse for not bringing it up if you suspect abuse. And I've always, as you can tell, been an outspoken advocate for, my patients that can't speak for themselves. So I'm willing to do all this, and I think we just need to educate vets in what the law is, who we report this to, how we're protected, how we get this case going, how we support the case, how we get evidence to Hilary so she can take the case to trial. And do we see it? Probably all the time. And we don't report these cases, and a lot of them just go by the wayside because we don't want to make a big deal about them. But I'm pretty sure it happens in every vet clinic in the whole nation, everywhere, all the time. We just don't.
Yes.
So if you suspect it, what's the first thing you would do? Ask the patient, the patient? Or what do you do?
Yeah, so I have examples of a lot of these things, which, we don't have enough time on this podcast. But for example, one case was an elderly woman, maybe 70s, brings her dog in, Muffy, a few times. Like the first time, okay, he's limping, let's treat it, send him home. The second time he's limping, okay, is this a coincidence or does this happen? Third time, he's now got a bloody nose. What's going on here? So you start, in my mind, I start thinking, okay, this is outside what I feel comfortable with. This dog is being injured way too many times. What's going on here? So, I have no problem asking questions. I ask lots of questions. So I find, I get her aside, I ask her these questions, and she's reluctant, but there's just, something in me that just wants to press this a little further. Turns out, over some conversations, yeah, her grandson lives with her. He's 20-ish. He's got friends over. They're smoking, taking drugs, drinking alcohol. And, the dog bit him because he doesn't want to be picked up by his leash, so he throws him across the room. So all this stuff starts coming out. But if you don't start somewhere and you suspect this, you're never going to get there. So, I'm emphasizing this because I think all of us have a responsibility, not just vets, but citizens. All of us have a responsibility to pursue this at some level. Were you going to say something?
We face sort of the same challenge because we are owner surrendered. So if someone brings us, it just happened the other day, someone brought in a dog, needed to surrender him because his leg was broken and they couldn't afford the vet care. We get it, okay? We understand that. But when we start saying, so how did his leg get broken? Because we've gone through training with the ACOs, Jace Huggins from Sacramento, Animal Care came down, worked with our staff who's on the front desk of this. So we start saying, well, he was gone for 2 weeks. He ran away and he just came back and he had the broken leg. And what we're seeing is this dog who's healthy on the body scale, right? So he hasn't been living on the streets with a broken leg trying to scavenge for food because that would be much more obvious to us. So we don't want to get in the situation, not because they're a client, but because we ultimately want these animals to come to us. We would rather be sort of the firehouse place where you can leave the baby than the agency that's going to narc you out because we have the slightest suspicion that there's a problem. We want you to bring us these dogs because we want them away from you. So we walk that thin line, but we also then let's just make sure we're taking some x-rays because we might see something that's more. We want to capture evidence in case this becomes a larger case. In case that, suddenly, the Animal Cruelty Task Force brings up, we've just got, these dogs that showed up here, here, and here, all from the same owner. And I'm like, I think I got one of those dogs too. Now we're seeing a pattern. Now I've got some evidence. So, and plus we don't want to get in confrontation with these people at the time of the surrender because people who abuse animals also abuse people. People who are violent with animals are always violent with people. This is not a happenstance. This is not two data points that happen to intersect. This is how it works.
Before we go further on that, when someone surrenders a dog, do you take the person's information?
Oh, yes.
So you know who
we require a driver's license. We record your driver's license number. Even if you say it's a stray, great. Where did you find it? I need your driver's license. I'm going to make a copy of that. I'm getting that information. We often get a lot of strays that the finder has an odd emotional attachment to. I'll just put it that way.
Okay. And do you ever get lied to?
Today? Yes. Tomorrow? Yes. Yeah. Last week? Yes.
And we as vets feel the same way.
Because it's the same thing.
In the emergency room, we get lied to all the time. Yeah. We know that. We're not stupid.
Right.
But when the guy says his dog fell out of the pickup bed, what do? Do you believe them all, believe none of them? Or do you, and my position is much like yours. I'd rather than be in the emergency room because so many of these don't come to a vet clinic at all.
Yeah.
So the ones we're seeing, I want to treat it. I want it to get better. At the end of the day, do I want to ask this guy if he did something, does this story make sense?
Right.
Or do I want to really just treat this animal, give him some pain meds, make sure he's, healthy out the door? Dilemma.
Just legally, just so veterinarians would know and the public knows, the requirement of vets reporting is located in the Business and Professions Code, and it only requires reasonable suspicion. So vets don't have to reach the point where they absolutely know 100% beyond a reasonable doubt and every other high burden that this animal is a victim of abuse. Reasonable suspicion is enough. Report it to someone, preferably one of the animal agencies, or I'm thinking that if you are a vet or an emergency hospital and a dog is brought to you, you should document the circumstances and what someone said to you, and then know that that's it. That is your requirement. You have fulfilled it. Because if you don't report reasonably suspicious abuse and you're a licensed veterinarian in California, it does constitute a misdemeanor if you fail to do so.
And even if you think nothing happens from that, if 3 different vets report the same person with the same behavior, suddenly there's a database that goes bing.
Yeah.
We got something here. So even if you think nothing happened, something may happen. So let's get it on paper.
As vets, I can probably speak for all of us. We absolutely care about animals.
Oh my God,
absolutely, 100% care about animals. So if it were up to each of us individually, absolutely, we would all be reporting everything we're suspicious of. The problem is, like I say, the challenges are, I have a boss here. Does what's my boss going to do with this practice? My patients are all going to leave. Are they going to come back to the clinic so there's just other challenges. But believe me, we are definitely advocates for the animal if we knew how to do this process right.
Does SPCA also, are you a mandated reporter also?
I don't think we are under the professional standards.
But they would.
But we would.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the C of SPCA is cruelty, right?
I think it's very interesting when we finally get a case. And let's say it's coming in from animal control. And when we do a premise history, we find out animal control has been out there 2 or 3 times. under odd circumstances that are similar enough where we know it is a pattern. And we know that that horse or animal or dog or whatever it is has been neglected for a very long time because the calls have been made by other civilians that are watching the property or neighbors that see something. And then, it's hindsight's 20/20. Well, finally you get it to where it's bad enough and you do the premise history and it's been bad the whole time. It's just they didn't feel enough, or maybe you had a different officer who wasn't as diligent, didn't want to do enough, but ultimately you end up with the animal and you look back and you say, oh, this has been happening.
And as long as someone reports it, then at that point, it's whatever the investigative agents, it's then their jurisdiction, their responsibility to do more of the questioning and the digging
Right.
and that kind of thing. So it alleviates the mandated reporters from having to push too
Oh,
hard.
yeah. Yeah, we would want them to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct, because for all the reasons we've
Yes.
already discussed.
Right. In terms of the public, how can the public help with each of your respective roles in preventing animal abuse? We talked a little bit about some of that, but is there anything else that you can think of that the public should know that would help?
Absolutely, education and bringing this up, like this podcast and news reports, things absolutely helps. And bless their hearts, those citizens who are out there diligent and vigilant and watching neighbors and watch what's going on in your communities. Those are vital. Like, just bless their hearts. That's all I can say, because many of these cases at the shelter are brought to my attention. My foster moms will come in and say, oh, did you see this cat was declawed at home? Or did you see this or that? And so, none of us can be out there all the time. So we have to depend on these kind-hearted civilians who bring it to our attention.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can find all of the Justice Journal podcasts on our website at sacda.org, iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube.